I have a love-hate relationship with video game movies. And if you've been around this channel for a while, you'll no doubt know this. Now, it might come as a shock to many of you that I myself grew up playing video games borderline religiously, and as such, I have a fondness and nostalgia attached to many of these specific properties. I grew up in an era where me and my sisters unwrapped a Wii console one Christmas many years ago, and our lives were changed completely. You see, one of the things I love about video games, but also specifically in Nintendo games, is how these games are crafted with care and intent in bringing people together. I still look back on this time in my life fondly and recollect on the stress and intensity we all felt as we grew closer to the intense final level of Super Mario Bros. Wii, or turned our motion control remotes through the confines of Coconut Mall and like Mario Kart, for example. However, although I love Mario and have a fondness attached to it, it might shock some of you to learn that I did not care for 2023 Super Mario Bros. Movie, and I made my position clear on this matter, much to the discourse of many Mario fans around the world. You see, one of the things I've realized in relation to video game movies over the last few years, no matter the specific property involved, is that often fans don't care about the intrinsic quality put into these films. Rather, they go in wanting and expecting blatant fan service and references, and as long as they get these elements, no matter how poorly conveyed or realized they might be, they leave ultimately satisfied. I will be first in line to tell you that if a video game movie manages to connect with you in terms of fan service, that's great and something to cherish. What I haven't agreed with, however, is the recent trend of conversation where these video game fans treat these properties and film releases as exempt from all forms of criticism or analysis, further gatekeeping the property by saying it wasn't, quote, made for non-fans or critics alike, and saying really only people who love the games and know the games will appreciate these movies on a complex level. Now, as someone who has made his position clear on the universal nature of film to connect audiences together, I find such a statement demeaning to the art form of criticism, but also grossly misguided in the grand scheme of things. While it's true that certain video game movies might hold references that only diehard fans understand, I've always appreciated how they at least try to convey a set story in relation to bringing new fans into the property to the best of its ability. This is why the trend of criticism towards the Super Mario Bros. Movies has been baffling to track, to say the least. Even before release, fans have made the claim that this movie isn't made for critics, and have cited that it cannot be analyzed as such. Perhaps that's why I was so interested in approaching the long-awaited follow-up to Super Mario Galaxy movie this weekend. As someone who grew up with the games, I have a fondness attached to this property and these characters, yet as a critic, I was able to see through the superficial gloss of Illumination's storytelling caliber within the last entry. I hoped above all that this film will be able to surpass the first in terms of genuine craft and nuance, delivering a story or entry that felt purposeful and meaningful in every sense of the word. And while it pains me to say that unfortunately the Super Mario Galaxy movie is more of a mixed bag, it is worth noting that in this entry there are smaller glimpses of this creative caliber visible at key points throughout, although they might feel suffocated underneath the rest of the material at play here. The basic story once again follows brothers Mario and Luigi, voiced by Chris Pratt and Charlie Day respectively, who once again find themselves in the confines of the Mushroom Kingdom under the rule of Princess Peach, voiced by Anya Taylor-Joy, after the evil Bowser was defeated, played by the ever-lovable Jack Black. However, trouble strikes when the news breaks that Princess Rosalina, played by Brie Larson, has been captured, putting the safety of not just their world, but the entire galaxy at risk. Mario, Luigi, and Princess Peach will once again have to team up with friends and unlikely allies to face a new foe that threatens their existence of their world as they know it. As always, before we dive into the overtly negative content of such a review, I do want to point out some of the positives in relation to the Super Mario Galaxy movie that are surely worthy of recommendation and praise. As always, Illumination Entertainment continues to deliver absolutely stunning visuals and graphics, especially on the big screen. Their technology and animation style continues to add such a realistic depth to the surrounding settings and atmospheres, especially within the film. For a movie that relies on these characters traveling to different worlds and galaxies outside of their own, the team behind this one really put careful attention and consideration to the world building on display. Whether it's the confines of the Mushroom Kingdom itself or Rosalina's core planet in space, there are sequences and visuals on display here that are simply jaw-dropping. This is a movie that is clearly made with love and passion towards the art form of animation itself, which is why it's so disappointing to consider Illumination's reluctance to place any stock into core thematic territory. You see, one of the most frustrating things about the studio, which continues to rear its ugly head within this entry, is that Illumination showcases some of the best in terms of visual craft and graphic rendering in the animation space today, yet squanders its goodwill away completely in favor of a core plot and thematic structure that is just non-existent. As mentioned, this is exemplified within the core of their entire filmography to an extent, notwithstanding some obvious exclusions, and the result of this is an amalgamation of ideas that I often struggle to make heads or tails of here, as they continue to replicate the shortcomings of their past filmography over and over again, and this is visible here as well, which is so disappointing. To put it into context, the weird thing about Super Mario Galaxy is how the pacing feels deliberate in terms of garnering a reaction out of audience members at moments throughout. However, I don't know if my crowd was just lackluster in this department, or the movie just isn't as funny or comical as it thinks it is, because these moments stood out with jarring impact throughout the film in key moments. The movie almost takes a brief pause in many moments as if it's waiting for audience laughter to die down, but in my showing, absolutely no one laughed at a single joke in this movie, meaning these moments stuck out of the woodwork with devastating impact. The Super Mario Galaxy movie also falls in the unfortunate thematic trap of many films of its caliber nowadays, especially within the realm of animation in particular. And this is in relation to its core plot on display, which could best be described as a jumbled mess of ideas all struggling for air at once. You see, it never feels like the movie itself knows what it wants to convey or execute at any given moment, meaning the unfortunate trend of filling the runtime with meaningless side plots and conveniences rears its ugly head yet again. The movie almost gives its audience whiplash in terms of narrative structure, where characters that seem integral to the core plot on display are introduced and then ignored yet again, as the plot quickly progresses to the next side plot and character introduction. It almost feels like the movie completely forgets side plots or characters until they're yet again convenient to the core plot or its fan service moment has been crafted for maximum impact. And this is surely jarring in the grand scheme of things in the overall movie itself. The thematic content of the film also feels noticeable in the context of how superficially lazy the storytelling on display here feels. Now in hindsight, I've heard the comments from Mario fans recently about how the stories of these films cannot be criticized or analyzed because the games themselves don't have stories and therefore shouldn't be expected to be thematically complex or nuanced. And honestly, these fans are half right. I don't expect the Mario movies to be thematically complex, that's definitely true. But I do expect all movies to at least attempt to convey a plot that feels at least purposeful and motivated in some capacity. And unfortunately, this is not the case for the Super Mario Galaxy movie overall. The film, as mentioned, relies on plot conveniences over and over again to address specific sections of its quote story, which gets increasingly more over the top as the film progresses. For example, there are moments throughout the film where characters will reveal a specific skill set or power to defeat or escape a situation, all while the film blatantly ignores how they could have utilized this earlier on in the film to escape another similar circumstance, but they didn't because it wasn't convenient. The movie, as mentioned, kind of meanders throughout its numerous side plots with no rhyme or reason to it. However, the most baffling and frustrating element of this specific contrivance is the fact that the movie never delivers a conclusion to most of these side plots. And to the ones it actually manages to address, they feel incredibly half-baked and underdeveloped in a sense. This is not a movie I left feeling satisfied in terms of narrative arcs or character development. Rather, as the credits rolled and the lights came up in my auditorium, I thought to myself, this is it? The movie also never devotes enough care or intent into the progression of dynamics between characters, as it raises some important issues and never comes back to address or add closure to them again. For example, the flourishing relationship between Mario and Peach was an important factor in the first film, and it continues to be a presence here. There are moments here where it feels like the film is setting up their relationship as something beyond friendship, and then the film ends with no progression whatsoever. The introduction of the character of Yoshi also adds some warmth and levity to the film, which is even more baffling considering how the side character of Toad showcases so much aggression and hatred towards the character, for a reason that is not even conveyed in the plot itself. These character-driven moments throughout the film feel incredibly half-baked and underdeveloped, serving little narrative context and standing out in such a discordant fashion. However, this isn't to say that the characters themselves aren't fun or engaging, and this is perhaps the strongest element of these films by far. Even within the first film, I stood by the fact that although the voice cast got flack upon its announcement due to how out of the box it all felt, the movie showcased that these performers could lock into these roles completely with earnestness towards the property, and this continues to be the case within this entry with new and old cast members alike. I absolutely love Chris Pratt and Charlie Day in the central roles of Mario and Luigi, where their characters are given so much familial chemistry to feel three-dimensional and grounded in every sense of the word. Day in particular is a standout here as Luigi overall, delivering comedic moments with his signature wit and charm. I also love Jack Black's casting as Bowser. It continues to live on in infamy here. Although it is worth noting that although Jack Black is clearly having a blast here, his energy feels weirdly dialed down for what the character requires. Donald Glover as Yoshi is yet another pick that I ultimately ended up respecting within the grand scheme of the film, who voices the character with the noises and flourishes that fans of the game will no doubt respect and love. However, there are three performers in particular who truly stand out above the rest of the competition alone. Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach continues to be one one of the greatest choices in this entire franchise. She makes the character something completely different in this universe, and adds such a spirit and authenticity that makes Peach leap off the screen. I loved Benny Safdie as Bowser Jr., a sentence that is weird to say out of context, who is the formidable and tiny antagonist who builds off his father's legacy with earnestness and respect, and Glenn Powell is just pitch perfect casting as Fox McCloud, the animal pilot who I would love to see in a solo movie if Nintendo and Illumination have one in the works. I think that could work out really well with Powell involved. And although I also loved Brie Larson as Princess Rosalina, who was a formidable force in the film herself, the shocking thing to consider with this film is how remarkably little of the runtime Rosalina as a character is given here, which means Larson is great when we see her, but I also left wanting more from her performance and character in particular. And although I do laud criticism onto the film for its narrative and craft shortcomings, there is something to be said about how everyone who worked on this film clearly holds Mario near and dear to their hearts, which is conveyed expertly in moments of creativity throughout the film itself. Brian Tyler's music score in particular is such a strong point here, surprisingly motivated in moments and building off the core music motifs and themes of the original games in an entirely new and unique way. The music score almost becomes a character in the film itself, which combines with the creative references that are pulled off throughout in such an innovative way. There are so many moments of this film where abundant creativity shines through, which is even more disappointing and disheartening when considering these moments in the context of the flat narrative thematic structure they lie in. Several references and moments here are carefully crafted and considered as an homage to the games, while also doing their own unique thing in the execution itself. There are different sound effects from the games as characters interact with their environments. The levels of the game itself are conveyed as different points on a map where Mario and Luigi must progress in their quest. There are even portions where Bowser Jr. looks at a security camera feed, which takes on the style of old 8-bit Mario games as the events transpire on screen. There are so many moments in this film where there are glimpses at how good this property could be if it wasn't smothered underneath the superficial gloss of its thematic structure. And I find that this is ultimately the biggest problem with the Super Mario Galaxy movie overall. The problems here have nothing to do with the idea of a Mario movie itself and have everything to do with how it's conveyed and realized in execution. However, on that level, I do find that it's important to note that fans might approach this film with a different mindset entirely. On that level, if the movie manages to connect with fans across the world, then maybe it has done its job overall. However, I do not agree with the common sentiment that these films are beyond criticism, which is another element that needs to be discussed in this conversation alone. It almost seems that fans worldwide, no matter the video game property, are so adamant in protecting these properties from any valid criticism or engagement with the artistry underneath. This is a phenomenon I've struggled to understand or ascertain in my tenure as a critic, but it's through careful contemplation that the real reason for this has begun to shine through. It seems that video game fans operate under the assumption that if movie studios are going to adapt a beloved gaming property to the big screen, this is the best they're going to get. And if audiences want to see more of this property adapted in the future, they find it's their duty to combat negative word of mouth to ensure future sequels and adaptations. There's almost a careful indifference to these properties from fans, as I do not think that many fans actually believe these movies are good in and of themselves, but rather care more about securing the success of future installments instead. And on that level, I absolutely understand this viewpoint 100%. After all, I know what it's like to approach a film with love and admiration for its subject matter or properties attached to it, and audiences always want to continue the legacy of what they hold dear to their hearts in terms of sequels, reboots, spin-offs, and other installments. However, I think we as an audience have a primary objective and goal here, which is to provide valuable feedback back to the filmmakers themselves. If we want video game movies to showcase genuine quality and cinematic merit, perhaps we should stop defending superficial entertainment value just because we love the property itself. If we truly love the property, we should want what's best for it. And this is where the true problem of the discourse surrounding the Mario movies lies. On that level, this review is not to say that fans of this franchise will not have fun watching this project on the big screen this weekend and beyond. As mentioned, Illumination knows how to craft genuine visual artistry on screen, and when the film turns its creativity and artistry up to a 10 in moments throughout, it manages to truly soar in moments. However, I approach this review not as a condemnation of the project itself and the team behind it, but as honest feedback from someone who loves the Mario property itself and wants to see it adapted to the silver screen in a way that parallels the motivated storytelling we see elsewhere in the animation realm. That's why I'm giving the Super Mario Galaxy movie a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.